To Startup Canada Live, Startup Foundations today. It's May 25th. My name is Jason Daly, and I'm a startup community builder, former startup leader for Startup Ottawa, and very active in supporting and promoting startups. And I'm happy to be here today discussing some really cool topics.
My name is AQEELA, and I'm a public servant by day and entrepreneur by night, and I spend my time working with Startup Canada to help build a vibrant ecosystem here in Canada.
And if it's your first time chiming in, Startup Canada is the national rallying voice and community for entrepreneurship in Canada. And so we welcome you to follow us on our social media channels.
And we're here live at the Startup Canada national offices here in Ottawa, Ontario. And we're also broadcasting in cubicles, co-working spaces across Canada.
So every Thursday, Startup Canada Live, we discuss topics relevant to Canadians and startups, the scale-up community and the small business community at large. We feature expert guests like we have today to provide insights on funding, growing, and scaling your successful ventures. So we are streamed through Periscope, Facebook Live, for easy viewing, and we have good friends at Restream.io, so you got all our social media channels covered. Startup Canada Live is brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks, Canada's leading provider of business, financial, and tax solutions for SMEs, and by Mastercard. Whether you need a card for purchases, need payment solutions to help you better track and manage your expenses, Mastercard is the right solution for your small business.
Today's Startup Live topic is cultivating confidence, the pitching do's and don'ts. We're joined today by two very special guests. Our first host on today's episode, joining us from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, is Heather Abbey. Heather is the founder and president of shopindige.ca, an online shopping platform with an Indigenous perspective. Heather stuck it through and overcame all the trials of starting a new business and founded shopindige.ca. from her underlining passion and ambition. Heather was a recipient of the 2016 Startup Canada Award for exemplifying the spirit of Canadian entrepreneurship. Also with us today, joining us from Alberta, is VINNIE, LYNCH, a sales and leadership coach, an ex-tech startup CEO, and avidly works to help businesses increase sales and gain success. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us.
All right, to those of you tuning in right now, you can ask questions anytime by using the hashtag StartupLive on Twitter or by commenting on Facebook Live video. And we'll receive your questions and feed them back to our experts today.
So before we get into our main topic, cultivating confidence, pitching do's and don'ts, we're going to have a brief icebreaker round. So that's for all of us as hosts. So I just want to ask, what's the most interesting thing you've heard in a pitch? Or if you haven't heard any or lots of pitches, but you've given lots of pitches, what's the most interesting thing you've done in a pitch?
I love this question.
Yeah, me too. Do you want to go ahead, Heather?
Well, I'd have to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm delighted to be here. And as far as the most interesting thing I've ever done in a pitch, I would actually have to say it would be at Startup Canada Pitch on the Hill last year, where I was pitching as one of the top 6 social enterprises. Now, I was so nervous and I had prepared for so long that the time came to pitch to the judges in front of this huge audience, and I was so nervous that I didn't see them handing me the clicker for my pitch deck. So I actually did my whole 5-minute pitch, no pitch deck, off the top of my head, and I started losing my spot in my pitch at about minute 3. So I just started speaking from the heart, and it actually resonated more with the audience and the judge than I think my perfectly prepared pitch would have. So it was interesting, it was fun, and I made a lot of great connections that day.
Oh, great story. When it comes from the heart, everyone can feel the authenticity, and that's always the best way to come across with your pitches, I'm sure. How about you, Vince?
Thank you for having me today. I guess one of the funniest pitches I've seen was by a gentleman back in Ireland who came into the pitch room, and we were sitting in a panel, for this competition, startup competition, and he was in drag, and it kind of threw us all. But it threw us all to the extent where we found it very hard to focus on what he was actually saying, because we were just wondering how he managed to put this ensemble all together. So that was one of the interesting ones. And I guess in terms of kind of a feature of where I see opportunities for people to improve on pitches, a lot of the time, particularly with product founders, is very feature focused. And we've had so many scenarios where I've sat down and said to people, look, I know it's a really cool feature you have. I'm sure I'll understand it in time. But if you could just tell me what the value is for me, your potential customer. So I think, if you were to ask me, kind of the funny one would be the drag, and the kind of interesting recurring thing where I see people an opportunity to get better at it will be to focus more on the value and less on the features.
So would you recommend people dressing up in drag, or more it's like a don't because it's a distraction?
It's a distraction.
Okay.
It's plain and simple. And I'm very open-minded, and, I've experienced lots of things, but that was definitely probably the funniest.
You'll get the attention, but it's the wrong attention. That's
exactly.
So that's one of our first don'ts.
Yeah,
right?
don't.
Don't dress in drag. Okay, or get
Or
the
be
right
crazy.
attention across and communicate your value. Fantastic. So I guess the quick shares, since we were asked to do so. One of the interesting pitches that I had been part of was on the Dragon's Den. It was for a whiskey for 12 barrels. One of my mentorees, and the producers wanted to have something to come across for TV audience. So what they asked was to take the character on the bottle, that it was part of the branding initiative I worked with them on, and it was basically a jumping, leaping skater who jumps 12 barrels. It's part of the story narrative why the recipe and the brand is there. So we created the character, and his father wore the outfit on the show, and it worked. Because he didn't have anything to say, he was just supporting the brand and the presence of the story. So sometimes it can work as long as it's not taken away. Yeah.
So, as long as it goes with the narrative, right?
That's right, as long as it goes in the narrative. I wanted to ask a question to Heather. As the founder and president of shopanddig.ca, since we should always give you a good positive plug for our expert panels that are contributing their time, what inspired you to start your business? Can you share your background and the experience and how it ties to your role in the company?
Of course I can. When I was a university student, I made these cute little feather and beaded earrings. And halfway through my first year in university, I found out, to my delight, that I was pregnant. And unfortunately, not to my delight, I was soon bed rested into my third trimester. So I couldn't actually supplement my student income that I was making through my scholarships. And I started trying to figure out how to get my product in front of people when I couldn't actually be there in person. I was trying the usual routes, the Facebook. I was trying, some of the larger e-commerce sites out there, but I was finding dedicated to Indigenous artisans. I was just another number in 100,000 other beaded accessories type of listing. So my friends, my family, and asking them, well, how do you get around the barriers you face? And they started responding. First, a few of them responded, then a dozen, and then I started getting all these ads on Facebook, where my personal Facebook grew by the thousands.
Wow.
And they were letting me know their barriers, which pretty much boiled down to one of three things. The first was money. I mean, it costs money to rent a table at a trade show, a booth at a powwow, and they didn't have that. The second was transportation. If you're trying to get your product to an expo, a trade show, a powwow across the city or the province, well, how do you do that without transportation? And the third was knowledge. There is a step from being an artisan to being a small business owner, where you have to know how to price your product, market your product, get your product out there, the shipping, the selling, everything that comes along with it. So I started to lump all these answers into one of three categories. And after I heard all these answers, I was thinking there's got to be a way, there's got to be something that can be done. So I took the monies from my scholarship. I took some love money that I was fortunate enough to receive from family, and I went to work creating this tiny little website that I hoped people would use. And I remember when the idea came about for it, I went to my Facebook and I asked, if I created an Indigenous e-commerce platform, would you use it? And the answer was a resounding yes. Awesome. So that was about 5 years ago. And we've actually grown into our second website. I've done 11 business and pitch competitions and been fortunate enough to place in every single one of them because, you know, as founders go, the money runs out. So I knew that I was in a place where I had to keep placing in business competitions to move forward and to grow my company. And now I'm fortunate enough to have investors on board, new as of this year. We're incorporated. You know, I'm living the dream that I thought was so far out of reach 5 years ago.
It's nice to hear that you're living your dream, but you're also helping your community and the people around you have access to the market, and they didn't have that before.
I hear a do in this.
Yes.
Do be focused when that is your goal, is to pitch and pitch to win. So focus is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question for Vinnie. So you were a tech startup CEO, and now you're a leadership sales coach. How did you make that move from CEO to coach? And what are your top tips for entrepreneurs to gain more sales?
Oh, okay, great. Good question, AQEELA. So it's been 7 years as a tech CEO in Ireland of a software as a service company. And we come to kind of, I guess, the peak in terms of what we believed we were going to achieve at that time. So we took an option of an exit to a competitor. And at the same time, my wife was, after having stood by me and through the chaos of that 7 years, she wanted to, or suggested we look at moving country. And while we still could, we didn't have any kids, etc. So I ended up in Alberta. And when I got here, I decided, well, what am I going to do? So initially, I started helping out Irish and UK companies who were trying to export into the Canadian and US markets. And that led to, you know, me doing more coaching work. And then I just decided to formalize it and to bring a lot of the learnings that I'd had in the field, the practical learnings of having gone through a startup to other companies. And the way I kind of tend to approach it is, you know, what would I have benefited from learning at that point when I was there? So in terms of kind of tips for growth, there's so many, but I suppose some of the key ones, and I look back to what we did and what maybe we could have done better. But the first one would be, at the start, you don't have a lot of credibility and you don't have a lot of access to really strong people. So networking is really important. You know, in Canadian terms, Startup Canada events, your local Startup Calgary chapter, be it in Calgary, be it in Toronto, Ottawa, etc., is really important. Pitch competitions, like Heather just talked about, is really important as well, just to gain the access to the network. But in terms of kind of tactics that you can deploy, I would say one of the best ones is at the start, when you're trying to get those early stage customers, at all costs, you have to get agreement by an early stage customer to give you a case study. So in your price negotiation, if you have to give a discount, but you have to get something valuable in return. And the great thing about a customer case study is essentially it's a way of them selling your product. So it could be a quote for your website. It could be a story that they allow you to publish. It could be a referral that they contact a friend that they have in the industry and introduce you to them, because you're really trying to leverage those early stage wins. So that's really important. And one other thing I would say is hire very, very slowly when it comes to salespeople. Salespeople are very good at selling themselves. And as a founder, like it or not, you need to be really, really strong on the sales front. And you will be. No one will be as passionate about this product or service as you will be. So getting out there with that passion, hiring slowly and shadowing those early stage salespeople is very important so that the message isn't diluted. And one last thing I would say is product market fit. Before anything else, at the very, very start, you need to try and get your product market fit right. And you should spend very, very little money. I would bootstrap until you get your product market fit right. And the only way you get that right is by talking to people in your target market. So get out there, get to the startup events, start looking up LinkedIn and contacting people and asking them to help you with some market research that you're validating your product or service, and get their input. People genuinely usually like to help. So yeah, they'd be my early stage kind of tips for startups when it comes to trying to break into early stage sales and to leverage those early stage sales to get more.
I totally agree. I was just taking some notes. You know, it's always helpful to keep, you know, as a student. But one of the key facets, if I would organize the way that you approach your pitch, and gleaning from what you just shared, Vinnie, if you have a problem that you want to solve and make into a business venture, thus a startup, you have to have a solution fit. And there's two ways to approach that. One is you either have a pain or you have a vitamin. So often you want to get to the point where you're solving the pain, much like Tylenol and Advil, versus nutrients and vitamins. So if you can really hit in on that, that's really key. The other facet is the market. Are you really talking to the customer? Vinnie reiterated this. Are you going out to the community to have the conversations, engage with stakeholders in the whole ecosystem so that you can get customer proof? If you get validation, that reaffirms where you're going next and how do you develop your product. They will tell you. You don't have to guess if you're talking constantly with their customer base. Their other facet is team. Do you have the experience and do you have the execution capability? And when the capability to expand on that, do you have a plan? Do you have the resources? Do you have the value proposition? How are you going to get them and how are you going to get there? And that's the facet that brings a whole piece together. So I'll go back to one of our questions.
Those notes after?
Yeah, here they are, right?
Okay.
Maybe we'll have to tweet them out, right? Maybe they're already being captured by Startup Canada team. One of the questions to dive into right next is when you have an idea, how do you develop into a pitch? Where do you start? Could I bring it back to Heather to help us answer that?
All right. Thank you so much. What a great question.
Thank you.
I'd have to say when developing your pitch, you need to look at some key points. You need to be able to clearly illustrate what the pain is, what the problem is that this.
So we're having a little bit
that
of
your
audio issues with you,
business
Heather.
is the solution.
So why don't we switch or take the question to Vinnie, and maybe you can answer that for a bit.
Sure. So I guess, you know, the first thing you want to do is you need to know your audience. So you need to know who you're speaking to. I think you need to understand the time involved, because it's very easy to lose the run of yourself and not to get your whole story out there, and particularly your value proposition pitch. So I break it into kind of the 1 minute, the 5 minute, and the 10-minute type pitch. So what can you get across in 1 minute? Can you get the whole story across? And there's a way to do that. And I use a thing, it's called the scrap model. It's an old journalistic kind of skill, where you start off with, you know, the situation at the moment is the kind of the complication with the current market situation is as follows. This, you know, the solution that I have is going to address it in the following way. And the action that you need to take to kind of access the solution is A, B, and C. And the proof is in the fact that, you know, X, Y, and Z have tried it and they love it, and here are customer case studies, etc. So you're trying to keep it very, very structured, and you can build out then once you make sure you get that first kind of minute out of you know, a structured pitch of the value that you have to your market, the action that your market would need to take to access that value, and the proof of the value. I think you can then lead into other questions. But the most important thing is particularly if you're nervous, focus on that first minute, because no matter what happens after the minute, even if you get dragged left and right during the pitch, at least you've got the core value out on the table, where you fit in the market, how people can access the product or service, and the benefits that other people are enjoying from that at the moment as well. A transformation story is really effective. So Heather even gave one at the very start in the first question of her experience of going through you know, the Facebook experience from university now 5 years later. I think that's really important. I would say short and on the point answers, and very much focus on an execution plan. And I'm going to give you just a 10-second insight on that, which is a lot of people are very good at business plans, and they'll say, this is our business plan and this is what we're going to do. to me, as an investor wants to know, what are you going to do with the money when I give it to you? So even if it's a pitch competition, my execution plan is in the first 30 days, this is my task list of who, what, when, the next 30 days, the next 30 days. And I would say plan those 90-day cycles and show the depth of understanding, not just of understanding your product, but what you're actually going to do with the money that you might win in the pitch competition or that you're trying to get from an investor. And that really gives investors confidence that you've done your homework. Now, it does open you up to more questions potentially as well.
Sure.
But that's fine, because if you've done your homework, you want to stand out from the crowd, and you want deep questions from your investors.
Certainly, in my experience, I find that there's not only do you have to understand, once they get through the understanding of what you're trying to solve, what your approach and your value is, they need to have belief. And that belief comes in with the detail you just explained, that you know exactly what you're talking about, where you're going, and how those funds are going to be utilized. So do your homework is another do, right? Don't do less than that, right? Get all the detail as your back file. You don't have to put it all out front. You really have to have it clear and crisp, but know your stuff. And I found with the belief factor being enough, if you get them won over with your idea and your charisma and your know-how, you can just get that second meeting. That's the whole go offer, right?
Yeah, that's the key, the second meeting.
Yeah.
But you brought up some really amazing points. A lot of people, they have awful pitches out there, and they crumble in getting their roadmap out. And that roadmap is really what leads people to connect with you, to invest in you. So get that roadmap out there.
Good point, good point.
So maybe we can ask, again, Heather, this question. Are you there, Heather?
I am.
Because I know you started off answering it, and we kind of got interrupted. So once you have an idea, how do you develop it into a pitch?
And the fundamentals of it, right? Any insights to add?
Well, I am able to clearly hear all the wonderful things that Vinnie had to share. In case my screen freezes again, I do just want to add that definitely a strong open and a strong close. And make sure you show yourself, you show your personality and who the person behind the pitch is. When it all comes down to it, people invest in people. If you can find a way to connect with your audience, with your judges, with your investors, and clearly articulate your idea, then that will go a long way.
I think, again, on that clear articulation, it's key. Because I've been to so many pitch competitions where people are like, oh, yeah, I have an AI chatbot, and it's just like Uber and Amazon all together. And you're like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
So you're humanizing it, getting it to your audience, understanding what your audience knows, and really telling that story.
So true. One of the startups I work with does a really good job to open up a pitch. And they use 3D software to collaborate. And what they use is an analogy, and this is where it often helps to get a really challenging, say, technical idea across. Theirs is quite simply, imagine you got to meet someone for the first time. Before you shake their hands, close your eyes, then try and shake their hands. All right? That's what happens in the 3D world. They don't use the 3D technology to connect the dots, and SmartShape.io solves that. So let me show you how. All right?
That's really good.
Right? That's a good way. This is something we had to work on. And my suggestion, is practice your pitch. And do it in the mirror, but then do it in front of someone. If it's an important pitch, ask a friend and say, hear me out, and just give me feedback and poke holes, and try and pull the best out of the person to come across and really articulate your message.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that. You said a do is practice your pitch.
Yeah.
Also test each component of your pitch.
True.
Because if you test, practice, iterate, test, practice, iterate, you're going to have a really solid section in your pitch, and you're going to build lots of solid sections, and then you're going to have that clean, crisp pitch that people will understand.
Excellent. And you're hosting Startup Weekend, right? What a great platform to practice a pitch and get an idea together, isn't it?
If you're in Ottawa, come by.
When's the date?
June 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Watch the Twitter feed for the details, right?
Okay.
Awesome. So we're going to go to another question or two, but I want to encourage you, #StartupLive. to ask questions of our panel and ourselves and just to contribute to the conversation. So one of the questions we wanted to feed forward is how do you reach out to investors or banks with your pitch? What's a good way to do so? What happens if they don't respond? And how do you find a way to reach them? So how do you break that nut? Maybe Vinnie, if you can handle that one to start.
Sure. Like I said at the start, I think it's really hard when you don't have access and you don't have credibility. So to me, I would start off at startup weekend events, pitching events, going to Startup Canada monthly drinks, founders and funders events. Like, you can't underestimate the power of meeting the right person at the right time. Yes. So that's the first thing I would say. Secondly, I would look to maybe who the investors are, even if it's just angel investment at the start, which is a great way to start, who the angel investors are in the sector that I operate in. So if I'm in a software as a service business and I'm based in Alberta, who are the investors who tend to have an interest in that space, because you want to get access to them. But also, I think what you want to do is you want to talk to potentially other founders and get their feel as to who to point you in the right direction. I think banks are tricky. Banks look for security, and it's very, very difficult. I think, to me, and it probably leads into other stuff, but to me, bootstrapping is so important, not just in terms of maintaining or conserving your cash before you have product market fit and you can scale, but it also helps to demonstrate to would-be investors the commitment that you have and the focus you have, and particularly with angel investment, which can often be your Series A round of funding, and they look for that. They look for the bootstrapping mentality, where they might be giving you $50,000 and they want to know exactly what you're going to do with it, etc. So I think I would network hard. I would do the usual, go LinkedIn, etc. It's very hard to get to the big players. So if you're going after big players and like the Silicon Valley type funds, they won't see you, but they will appear at pitch events. So I would say pitch events, all the Startup Calgary, all the Startup Canada type stuff, drinks nights, founders, funders evenings, and just get out there, because a lot of the time, a lot of this stuff is on in evenings and the weekends for the very reason. I use you as an example, even AQEELA, where you have a day job, this is your side hustle, and you're trying to build it up. So the great thing about a lot of these events is they're on in the after work weekend space, so it gives people a chance to get validation early, and it also gives people a chance to access the type of people they need to access.
So very true. I find the personal approach is always a best start, but using LinkedIn to research who in your network could make a warm introduction, and you got to pay it forward. There's a lot of entrepreneurial sort of reciprocity. So before you ask, give, and that's where the community is there for you. There's always volunteers needed for major events and activities, and we've mentioned a few of them, and contribute. When you contribute, firstly, you're able to ask for what you need, and it's a bit of a karma type of mentality, but it totally works. It's been the way that I've always built the foundation for my businesses. But it's not always easy, and sometimes you're in a remote situations, and that's a question to put back to you, Heather. Yeah. Have you been challenged getting the investor connections? Because customers always wins. So you've done it by customers. Is there other things that have won the attention of investors for you?
For me, it was making sure that I'm well-rounded myself. Mm-hmm. When you are starting up, you're going to do a lot of things for free. And you need to get yourself out there. Volunteer at startup events that you can, then that will lead to introductions. And, make sure that you learn about anyone I've ever reached out to. I've made sure that I learned company, I learned about their C-suite, I learned about, their mandate and everything. Was fortunate enough to get that introduction or to get my foot in the door, then I had something to follow up on. I also knew that I didn't want to come in and, make demands and for favors and, ask for anything before I was able to show them who I was. Right. So I did a lot of volunteer work. I built up my LinkedIn, and then I started cold calling. I started tweeting at people until they responded to me. And, often it was about just making a cold call and saying, hey, I really admire what you're doing. Can I please take you for a coffee? And, I've never actually met anyone that said, "Oh, I'm too busy for that." People are anxious to share their knowledge with the next generation, and so then it goes a long way.
Okay, so do your networking, do your homework, and
Help.
help, right? And don't ask before you give.
Yeah,
right? Some good points.
A lot of good do's and don'ts. Heather, you're in a very specific space that's a combination of a platform where you sell goods and also a social good enterprise. What kind of questions do investors specifically ask you?
Right away, they want to know my numbers. They want to know how many people I've been able to reach. They want to know how many customers I have on my site in terms of buyers and sellers, where my hotspots are all around the world. And, it's always helpful to me to share with them how I've positively affected my sellers. I have had many sellers that have been able to make sales on my first website that they weren't able to make on eBay, on Etsy, where they felt they were another number. So once again, it all came back to sharing the stories behind the numbers and what made us so unique and what made us, such an amazing niche website that they were always compelled to continue the conversation beyond, the first, what's your numbers, how many people are you reaching? And so it was really about using my personal brand and using who I am as a person to continue those conversations as well.
I can see that. I had just a thought of a pitch where there's always questions asked of the investors. But I've had a personal experience just in a recent pitch where by asking the right questions to the investor, you find out what their motivations are and what moves them and gets them thinking why they want to believe with their cash and their checkbook, right?
That's a good idea.
And so you ask good, pointed questions, and that comes from what Heather said about doing some prior research, looking at the C-suite, looking at their LinkedIn profiles and mandates, even their social channels, but what they're sharing in their messages outwards. So ask good questions is another tip that I've found is really important.
And it's like a good way to connect with them.
Yeah, definitely.
And connection's that key to get the money.
Oh, isn't it? So, is there some stories either of you would like to ask about? How did you pitch your idea for your business, and what problems or parts of it where you may have fumbled or messed up? How did you overcome it? Because that's always the fear of pitching. Is like, what if they don't believe, or what if? Maybe you can share a story so everyone can empathize and feel that, we're people, we're infallible. You just have to come across. How? Vinnie, would you mind answering?
Yeah, sure. So I think back to kind of the early startup pitching back in 2006, and we were pitching to angel investors. And we also, I guess, were conscious of the fact that investors, and there was a few VCs in the room. So investors, whether you like it or not, are thinking about an exit at some stage because they want to know when they're going to get the money back. So we weren't really very good at that. And what I mean by that is we didn't have it properly articulated, when, we were going to be in a position to give them the money back. We hadn't thought that far ahead. Now, on one side, that's good because you're very focused on business growth and you just want to, make it viable and continue to build the business. But on the other side, the investor is looking for that kind of assurance that there's some sort of thought, even if it's not a plan, just some sort of thought given to an exit where they can, get back their cash. So that was one thing. The second thing, I think, we overcomplicated our pitch, both to investors and to early stage customers, because we had three real points of value. One was a cost saving angle, one was a health and safety compliance angle, and the other thing was a project efficiency angle. So they were our three main value streams. But you know what? We ended up confusing people because we ended up bringing too many buyers into a room when it came to kind of early stage sales meetings. And when too many people are in a room from different departments, it slows down decision making and decisions don't get made a lot of the time. So that was one issue. But also from the investor's perspective, I think we would be in better place saying, look, this is about cost saving. There's X% return on labor costs by implementing this software platform. And that's what we're going after. And we should have been very backed ourselves on one core value point and introduced as well the fact that there was other stuff coming down the line in terms of, product development roadmap that we were going to bring to the table. But in essence, what we did was we looked for money to build it all. And I think we should have just built one piece, gone narrow, deep, because it would have helped us not just more with investors, but it would also helped us with early stage customer meetings and created less confusion in the buying process. Because like it or not, you have to fit into the buying process of a customer. So, one last point I make on that is, some people say at the start, oh, we don't have competitors. We're so unique. I hear this all the time from founders. But my first question or first response to that always is, find a competitor and find them fast. Because you have to find a competitor and differentiate from them on some sort of value, be it financial, be it a compliance angle, an efficiency angle. Because when your buyer is looking at your space, they'll silo you. They'll put you into a silo with those other competitors. So jump in there. You have to be compliant almost to their buying process.
Right.
So go in there with the other competitors, but have a really strong story on your differentiation. So that would be my tuppence worth.
So don't say you have no competitors. Do make certain that you're differentiating from those competitors. And it comes to the point, there's jobs that are done. They may not be exactly all that you do, but a customer will put those jobs that they need to accomplish in the same silo, and that is a competitive offering. So if they say you do this the same as some other solution that you don't think is the same, doesn't matter. Customer perspective, that's competitive.
And also, again, be focused.
True. Yeah. Laser.
Because I also had the same problem. Had 3 avenues out there, and everyone got confused.
All right.
So I know we have a question on Twitter. It's from Renee Tavares. Is it important to add a story to your pitch? Does it make it stick? That's a really good question. Maybe, Heather, you can answer that one.
I say definitely. A story is what resonates with people. If they can, find a place in their own past that you've managed to make them happy, then you're the one that's going to stick with them. Your pitch will stick with them. But, it also lets them know where you come from and why you're doing what you do. You didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to make money. I'm going to do this awesome idea. If it comes from a place in your life that you feel passionate about, then that's going to reach not only investors, but that's going to help build your brand. That's going to reach your customers. And then it all comes forward into a nice little ball, a nice little business.
Yeah, and on that point, investors are looking to see why you started and if you have the ability to execute. And if you come from a place where you had that problem and you tell that story, then they're going to believe in you and they know you're going to execute well.
Yeah, there's always so much more credence put to the fact if you experience the problem, so that you have more awareness as to all the challenges and how to overcome them. And that motivates you to go out and say, you know what, no one's solving this, so I must. Yeah. Nothing better than an investor saying, all right, this person's on a mission.
Yeah. Right?
So mission stories and others really work. For the company transformation, thus in the name, I was looking at all the conversation with customers saying, I like what you're doing, but we have this whole customer journey, how we interact from the first time they hear about us to how we service them as a customer. And the solution that we were thinking about was just not enough. We needed to provide them the ability to look at the whole customer interaction as a journey from start to finish to success and make them a raving fan. We had to expand the idea of what transformation was about, and thus the customer journey mapping story software came about. And that's what we listened to customer and had to address it. So,
yeah, I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, thanks.
I know I was recently at a pitch in the U.S., like a pitch competition, just in the audience, and all the startups were having their pitch, and their last slide is, we're the team to make this happen. But there was one startup from Vancouver and San Francisco, and they had that story weaved in all the way through, and their team is Hazel. And they're like, we were really, really bad at this. We were awful. And saying that, and then creating a product to solve it really made everyone believe in it. And out of all the startups that competed for 3 days, they won because they had that clean story, and they actually showed, this is why we made this product and made people believe in it.
Yeah, people push you up when they have the belief, right? That's so true. Well, it comes down to some important things. You're trying to move with a pitch towards an investment, let's say. So what are the questions, and we put this back to our panel with us, what different investors are looking for? What are those key questions? If you can sound off on some of those, and Heather, if you could start, that'd be great. What are investor questions that they're looking in your pitch?
I am so sorry if that question was for me. My camera seems to have frozen.
Yes, no problem. Are we still clear with connection? Because we can put it to Vinnie for now and see how it goes. Vinnie, what questions and what elements are investors looking for?
It's funny, when I think about this question, just as you're asking it there, I was thinking about what are the left field questions that come out. So the standard questions are they want to know about, so I'll break it into two. The standard questions, they want to know about you. They want to know about your personal story, why you're doing this, where the idea came from, why you came up with the idea. It'll be something you've come across in your own work life or something you've experienced through friends, and you see a challenge and an opportunity to overcome that challenge and provide value. So that's, these are standard kind of pitching questions. I look for kind of the left field ones, and some of the ones that can make you feel uncomfortable, like, how do you know how much money you need, would be a classic one. Another one would be, where do you see yourself in this company if this company grows based on your growth plans? And often what investors are trying to get at there is, are you the right person to lead the company in the medium term? So, I think, what's the right answer to that? I think you have to be open. You have to say, look, particularly if you don't have maybe a proven track record in terms of leadership experience, you have to be open to that, to the fact that, in time you might need a professional CEO, but right now the most important thing is keeping it narrow focus, getting early stage customers on board, getting the product out, and pushing the dial forward. So in terms of another left field question, what would you do with my money? If I gave you the $50,000 you're looking for now, what would you do next Monday? Tell me. And that's where people can get rattled because they'll have their business plan.
Yes,
and say, no, I want to actually know what Monday is going to look like. Tell me what next Monday is going to look like. So they'd be the kind of a few of the left field questions. I think one last thing I would add is when it comes to the market as well, they're trying to see, are you aware of the market to the extent of how it might change? So they might ask questions like, where do you see the target market you're focusing on being in 3 years' time, and how will you fit into that? So I think left field questions, you can never get enough of them in terms of preparation because it gives you the most robust kind of pitching kind of arguments, if you like. But you can get anything. So you've got the standard and then you've got the unusual.
That's so true. And also the what if questions. That's really about the dynamic of, are you thinking about all the facets and the risks and all the possible outcomes? And if you're able to answer confidently, not cocky, right? Key. You're able to show that you're thought through the process and the next steps. And if it starts right from Monday and you know where you're going, and I know of a startup that they put in their plan inside of their use of proceeds was to attract a key executive to take on a leadership role, to know their weakness. So do know your weaknesses and identify it. Shows that you're being humble, because the obtaining financing and funding is only a means to an end, right? Sometimes it gets misplaced in the raising of funds is the end. No, that's just, all right, now get to work, right?
Yeah. A lot of people forget that. And I even know my personal mentors, they were like, we know our weaknesses, and if we display our weaknesses, they're going to find us more trustworthy.
That's
if
true.
we show who our competitors are, they're going to find us more trustworthy. And so that trust is like a big factor.
Great point. Trust, certainly. Most certainly.
I think we have another question from Twitter. Okay, Rochelle, should we add a demo, or should you add a demo in your pitch? Oh, okay.
Good question. So often is the case. Heather, can you hear us clearly? Do you add a demo of your technology inside your pitches to your investors? Has it been successful?
I have and I haven't, and I find that if I do add a demo in my pitch, then I'm so reliant on making sure that it comes off exactly as it's meant to, that I would just much rather describe it, and I would rather rely on my words and letting the judges or letting the investors or letting whoever know that I can explain it simply as if, just in simplest terms possible. I've never relied on a demo because I tried once and it did mess up. And so now, I don't even add them into my pitches. I never have. If you can use your words to make your judges see what you're trying to create and that you're the person to do it, then, that's the simplest and the strongest way to reach them.
Oh, isn't it? One of the mentorees that did a pitch for a delegation from Beijing, we actually had a student translate just in case it wasn't there. They all spoke English, but the fact that they had a person there that could translate very complex ideas, they appreciated profoundly to know that they were taking that amount of thinking about who they're talking to, who their audience was. And so I commend Alicorn Chemical for doing that. So any stories, Vinnie, because you coach on this, so you must have some really good insights and expertise to share.
Yeah, I think the first thing I say is very aligned to what Heather said. You have to rely on yourself and your ability to get the value across. So if you said to me, I had a 3-minute pitch, I probably wouldn't show anything to do with the software. It's more about the story of the value, because ultimately, the focus should always be about getting to the next step. And if you do a good enough job on explaining your value in that first 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute pitch, it can get you to the next step. In the next step, you get into more detail. The exception is if your software really helps accentuate and blow up the value story you're telling, then to come in with it at a point in the presentation, probably nearer the end, with either a screen recording, it could be a video that you've had made, or it could actually be a physical demo. I'm less of a fan of a physical demo and more of a fan of a screen recording, because I think you lose the vibe, when you go to, I'll just go over here to my computer and start showing you how this works, as opposed to, I'm just going to press this button video and it's going to show you a lovely video of the feature, of the kind of feature set which delivers the value. So I would say you have to keep it smooth. It has to be smooth right through. And if your demo could block that smoothness or interrupt that smoothness, then no, or do the video piece. I like the video piece myself.
Oh, I have such a horrible story for transformation. We had a blow up with the technology. We couldn't access their Wi-Fi. They had, we relied on that. We couldn't access it because of firewalls, so we're kind of dumbfounded. Okay, we got to speak to it. Luckily, we had a blog that captured, the visuals to speak to, but it really challenged the first 15 minutes of the conversation. So we had to sit in our spoils for having relied on that demo to come across, and it didn't.
I've had make or break stories with live demos. I now have learned that a live demo is just an icing on the cake. Your pitch has to be fabulous. And you can always put screen grabs and screenshots of what your actual product looks like throughout your pitch. And at the end, maybe have that video of your actual product. Yeah. And that's just an icing on the cake. Even a live demo is just an icing on the cake. And it can take you far, but if it goes wrong.
Yes, so true.
So that's why, in the end, have it pre-recorded if possible.
Great
and
point.
Just make sure you don't have to rely on Wi-Fi or internet.
So true. I know we're getting near the conclusion of our startup live chat. One of the questions we had here was about what resources can we offer that people can look into further. I can offer one or two. Look at guides.co. They have a number of playbooks inside that really inform on either building your lean startup canvas as a starting point, then building your deck. They have guides in there to step you through with experts. There's also Lead to Win has a number of resources about a template on pitching. Yeah. So those are two resources. Do you have any yourself, AQEELA? And then we'll put it to our experts. What resources do they offer our audience?
So for me, I definitely look at the Y Combinator School.
Yes.
They have some amazing videos out there that can help you along with your pitch. Also, there's so much out there on the internet. So I go to companies that I really like, see how they made their pitches, and try to replicate that. Or even if you go online and look for winning pitches, see how those people made those winning pitches, see what you can incorporate, and really test with people, like real people. And I know for Montreal Startup Festival, they have this thing where you pitch to grandmothers. And
Yes.
it's the best idea because you want everyone to understand. So if you just take anyone and you pitch them and you try to make them understand, they're going to be able to give you feedback if they can understand your pitch. And I think that's like one of the best resources.
For certain. Yeah. So we put it to you, Heather, and then Vinnie, if you could offer any additional resources, perhaps yourselves.
Okay, great. When I first started, I was and still am a huge fan of Stan and Shark Tank. And so I actually had a notebook next to me where I wrote down all the words that I didn't understand. And there were a lot. And then I would sit there and I'd look up every single word and find out the definition, and I would practice it. I would practice it when I was rocking my baby to bed. I would practice it until I knew what it meant. And after that, you know, pitching just became a lifestyle. If Dragon's Den or Shark Tank was on and I was doing something else, I'd probably have it playing in the background. Like you said, I do look up pitches all the time. I look to see what I like. I look to see what I don't like. But I always make sure that the pitches work for me personally. I've had moments where I've tried to use the lingo that I don't understand, and it just came off sounding forced and unnatural. And, you know, you always have to remember that there are people on the other side of your pitch. And if there's going to be 20 pitchers in a lineup, you have to make yourself stand out, you know, have a strong open, a strong close, make sure you entertain them. I'm not saying to the point where you know, dress up in drag or any sort of thing like that, but, you know, make sure that you stand out, that you're larger than life, that you practice speaking and practice, you know, if you're going to be in front of an audience of 700, make yourself bigger, you know. It all comes down to properly preparing for the moment. You need to understand the factor as well as showing who you really are.
I can see why you've been successful in your pitch events. Don't you see it?
Yeah. I've actually heard her live, and she was amazing.
Excellent. Vinnie, any tips to share yourself?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, you know, the web research is really important. So you'll get lots of stuff out of Google. I love Y Combinator and the videos there, and that you talked about AQEELA, because those people have gone through probably one of the most intensive pitching competitions to get there. And the videos that they share, you could say, oh, but they're for big, you know, VC round players. The same logic applies. So that's definitely one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is go to the startup competitions. Go and talk to the judges afterwards and ask them what was the most important thing from their perspective about pitching. What, you know, if you were pitching to them, what would they look for in a pitch? And by doing that, you're doing two things. You're building up more network. So there is a second angle, but you're also just getting from, you know, the horse's mouth, for want of a better word, what they believe to be, you know, the components of a winning pitch. And I've done that myself, and I tell companies to do it all the time, because you've seen yourself. Very, you know, at a pitch competition, the judges love to talk to you. That's what they're there for. They're happy to talk to people. So take advantage of that.
That's very wise. And fortunately, with the startup communities across Canada, there's startup pitch nights. And a number of stakeholders and people from industry are there to contribute their time. I know Startup Ottawa held one recently, and it was a great evening. And from that, Intuit Canada, as one of the sponsors, was providing a pitch award. $1,000 was won by one of the best pitches of the night, and this is across many communities in the startup community. So do look at the feed for your local startup community. Find out when the pitch nights are coming. If it's not soon enough, why don't you offer to host one and help out? Yeah.
I think pitch nights are the best way to get feedback.
For sure.
I know, like, my first pitch competition, we thought we did amazing. The audience loved us, but when we talked to the judges, we realized where we made those mistakes and what they didn't understand, and that gave us feedback to go to the next competition, and we got better and better and better.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. Yes, it's true. And Well, we want to see if there's any additional questions through Startup Live, the hashtag. We'll just quickly check to see. There is, okay.
Oh, I like this one.
For shy people, is personality and attitude just as important as the content you're pitching?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
How about, let's put it back to our team. Who would put up their hand and say they're shy in pitching?
All right.
No? How would you coach somebody who is shy, Vinnie?
Look, confidence. Confidence is something that, and I look at either in pitching or in sales. There's two. One of the biggest blockers to people succeeding is confidence, and you get confidence by practicing, and you get confidence by looking at how other people did it, and you start to align yourselves to someone who's very similar to you in personality who succeeded, and you delve into their story and how did they do it. So to me, it's about having a structure. So when you have a structure to your pitch, it gives you confidence to stick to the structure. So that's really, really important. And I think that that confidence comes with practice. And you referred to it earlier on, and I'll share one anecdote I heard before at a pitch training event where it was an Irish guy called Tony O'Reilly. He was the CEO of Heinz worldwide. And his PA told a story, or former PA of his told a story that he used to practice. If he had a 1 hour presentation to investors, he would practice that 3 times. Once on his own, second time with her, and the third time with her and key executives. And he would actually wear the clothes, including the tie, the little handkerchief, and the cufflinks he was going to wear on the day. And when he was renowned as one of the best public speakers in a presentation, a Q&A format, and primarily because he practiced. But people don't see that. So anyone who says it's natural, it's not. So I would say build your script and internalize it. The best actors in the world are reading from a script, but they never sound like they're reading from a script. So build your script and internalize it. That will give you the confidence to be able to go up there and rely on the backbone of your script.
Heather, would you like to add anything?
Yes, definitely. Confidence comes from knowing what you're saying. Exactly. My fiance helps me whenever I have a big pitch coming up. If it's 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I'll make sure I clock in at 59 seconds. And what I do is I write out everything, but I write it out like I'm talking to an audience. And, my fiance will help me while I'm practicing, and he'll just give me a random line from my pitch in, page 2. And then it's my job to pick it up, write the next line. And we keep doing that all over my entire pitch. So I know if I forget a line or if I mess up on a line, then I know what's coming next. And I have the confidence to continue my pitch and to get back on track. And something else that I've done is I actually took improv classes. And that really helped me in being able to think quickly on my feet. It helped me learning how to talk to people. I was very shy when I first started, so I would look above people's eyebrows and scan the room kind of in an infinity symbol. So I looked like I was looking at people, but I wasn't, because I understood that if I made eye contact with someone in the first row, then what was I saying? I would blank out and I would forget it. So it's a lot of practice. But also, if you can go and see the room that you're pitching in, if you can put yourself physically in that location, then it's going to make you more comfortable when the time comes to pitch. And above all, practice, and make sure you know what you're saying.
Thank you, Heather and Vinnie. You've just given some real gems. And the confidence, this is the nature of the conversation we're having today, cultivating confidence towards the pitching's do's and don'ts. I hope everyone who is participating and listening in today is really taking notes. I know I have. And we'll hope that we should probably conclude here. So I wanted to just pass along that next Thursday, June 1st, we'll be discussing building a compassionate workplace. We'll have our hosts, Anastasia Valentine and Sunshine Tenasco. And we have guests Rob Villeneuve and Mark Kuo. So you can register for the event and more and get the updates at startupcan.ca/events.
And you can also stay informed about all the latest opportunities, announcements, the Entrepreneur Net events by following Startup Canada on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and following us on Instagram. A new Startup podcast drops every Tuesday on iTunes, and Startup Canada is live on Periscope and Facebook Live and event stream every Thursday at noon. To everyone joining us today, the entrepreneurs, the startup community leaders, and the broadcast viewers, thank you for having us, and have an enterprising week. Thanks.
Thanks very much.